What is the best microscope? So hello and welcome again, Microbehunter here, and today I would like to respond to a very common question that I receive. And I often receive emails where people ask me, what is the best microscope to buy, and can you please recommend a brand and or a specific model? And I consider this always to be one of the most difficult questions to answer. And for this reason, I decided to do a separate podcast episode on this topic. And one of the reasons why I think that this is such a difficult question is because different people have different quality expectations. So it is not only something that depends on the microscope itself, but also to a large extent on the expectations of the different people. I will try to answer the question anyway, as good as I can, and I'm going to give you now two possible answers, and I already know that they might not fully satisfy you, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, what is the best microscope? Answer number one, the best microscope is the microscope that you will use most often because you enjoy using it. Okay, so especially if you are a hobby microscopist, an amateur microscopist, if you like using the microscope and therefore if you end up using it a lot, well then this is the best microscope. It's probably an answer that you did not expect. There is also a second possible answer, and this answer probably relates a little bit more to research. The best microscope is the microscope that will get the job done for the least amount of money. So if you have a cheap microscope that gets the job done, then this is better than if you have an expensive, high quality microscope that will also get the job done to the same level. So yeah, this probably does not help you because it will not support you in making any purchasing decision. And for this reason, I'm going to break down this topic a little bit into sub-parts, and I've brainstormed 8, 9, maybe 10 different points what quality can actually mean, and I would like to talk about that. And I am actually going to give you a recommendation for a brand and also some possible models that you, not because I automatically recommend them that you buy them, but maybe as a starting point to do further research, and then you can actually have a basis to compare different microscopes with each other. So a little bit, some more background material here. The reason why this is so difficult to answer is a little bit like asking, well, which photo camera should I buy to go on a holiday? Well, I mean, you can take holiday pictures with a mobile phone camera and also with very, very expensive DSLR cameras. Or if I say, okay, which car should I buy to go to my work in the morning and back? I mean, yeah, a very cheap car can do that and a very expensive car can do the same thing. So it's a little bit with that with microscopes. Some people ask me, well, what microscope do I need in order to see water life? Well, honestly, pretty much almost all of them, you know. So what are now some of the things that you should look for? And many people think that they have to look for the magnification, the maximum magnification. But as a matter of fact, this is, I think, one of the least important features, because pretty much all microscopes magnify the same anyway, and some companies sell the microscopes with a very unrealistically high magnification anyway, and you just have to ignore that. In my view, judging a microscope based on the maximum magnification is a little bit like judging a car based on its maximum speed, and that's only one aspect of many other aspects that one might take into consideration. So what are now some of the quality criteria? And I'm going to simply list them out first, and then I'm going to go into more details. Quality can refer to the optical quality, the mechanical quality, maintenance, so whether the microscope can be easily fixed, ergonomics, so that is basically how comfortable is it to use the microscope. It can refer to the illumination system, basically the lamp and the lighting system, very important if you do a lot of photography through the microscope. The question on upgradability, how easily can the microscope be upgraded? Are there even parts available? And also the design is basically the appearance of the microscope. This could be important when you want to use the microscope for showcasing something, and when other people see the microscope, you probably want to have a nice looking microscope, if this is important. And also, of course, personal preference. Emotional connection to the microscope can play a role. And last but not least, of course, also the cost. And I'm going to now go into a little bit more details here. And yes, as promised, there are certain brands and microscopes that actually combine most of these points. And then there are some brands that don't, okay? So now let's start with the optical quality. If you are really interested in a very high optical quality, then you need to get objectives that are highly corrected. And this means that they correct a lot of aberrations, lens errors. And those objectives can be very expensive, and they are not available for all brands of microscopes. So if the top optical quality is really important for you, then you have to buy yourself a high-end microscope. However, and that's also important, the top optical quality might not always be necessary, because sometimes people worry, I have to buy the most expensive optics so that I'm able to see the things, but this is not always necessary. As a matter of fact, if you do not know what to look for, you might even not notice the difference. So this is one consideration, and another consideration could be the eyepiece. There are certain microscope brands that have eyepieces with a very large field of view, eye relief, and so on. And these are, of course, quite expensive then, those eyepieces. Concerning mechanical quality, focus system, stage, revolving nose piece, here I would say there is also a little bit of a difference, but you won't notice the difference at the beginning, only when it breaks. I remember that we once had microscopes in school, and they were mechanically not very good. But they worked fine, but after a couple of years, the things started to come apart. And upon closer inspection, we could see that essentially they were not really manufactured to very close tolerances. And this was indeed an issue, but sometimes you don't even see that. You're never going to see in a microscope specification very good mechanical quality. I mean, you don't see that, right? So I admit that this is a little bit of an issue here. Maintenance, here this is getting interesting now again. Are replacement parts available? Is servicing available? Is documentation available on how to maintain the microscope and how to do service on it? And last but not least, is the microscope also modular so that you're even able to take the microscope apart? So, for example, lower cost microscopes essentially have some of the parts hardwired, so to say. I mean, it's not easily possible to exchange the LED, the LED, the light, because it's soldered into the microscope. So you have to do some soldering. So it's not really quite as easily to maintain and to service. But then there are certain high-end microscopes where essentially they're so modular that you can easily unplug and exchange all of the parts. The ergonomics refers to some health issues as well, because especially if you're using the microscope for a very long time, many hours a day, doctors do that, researchers do that, then you want to make sure that the microscope is designed using ergonomic considerations. So this can basically mean, for example, that the eye relief is large. So this means that the eye to eyepiece distance is larger. The size of the microscope might play a role here. So if the microscope is too small, for example, then you have to sit stooped over the microscope, and you get your back might start to hurt. The eye distance between the two eyepieces should be adjustable. Most microscopes actually have that. And some microscopes even allow you to adjust the tilt of the eyepieces, so that basically taller people can look into the microscope more from the top, and shorter people from more horizontally. So the tilt can be adjusted. It can also mean that, for example, the focusing systems are low-lying, so that when you focus, you can actually rest your arm or your hand on the table. And these are all ergonomic considerations. The next one would be the illumination system, the lamp. And this can, of course, mean light intensity, but it can also refer to the flickering of the lamp. So, for example, in my case, it's really important that I get a very, very stable illumination, and I do not want to have a flickering, because this is something that you see when making videos. And because I make a lot of videos using my microscope, therefore a very stable illumination system is important. But again, not all microscopes have that, and worse yet, you might not even know because it's not mentioned in the specifications. The next point is upgradability. I mean, I hear quite often where people then also write comments and emails, and they say, I want to upgrade my microscope. I want to exchange it with better objectives. And then you say, well, but actually, there is really not a lot of things that you can upgrade here, because the company simply does not offer these possibilities. I've also heard, for example, people who wanted to upgrade it using a photo adapter, but the company did not supply one. You had to get a photo adapter from a different company. Or, for example, upgradability concerning special purpose objectives. So objectives, like I give you an example here, water immersion objectives also exist. So you do not use oil, but you use water. This can sometimes be useful when observing water organisms. But again, these are not features that all microscope companies offer. Or, for example, people ask me, can I upgrade it to phase contrast? You need special objectives for that. You need condensers for that can be centered. Not all microscopes allow for that. And some brands have models of microscopes that do. But then again, if you're not interested in upgrading it, then it might not be worth actually investing money here. The design, I already mentioned that might be important to some of you. Personal preference, I also do not want to comment too much about this, other than that if there's an emotional attachment to the microscope, then this can also play a very important role, even if the microscope otherwise might not be so good. I'll give you an example. After I finished university, I bought myself a microscope as a present to myself. So I have a very strong emotional attachment. I mean, this was several years ago already, quite a few years ago. But honestly, the modern low-cost microscopes, I spent quite a bit of money on that device, but the modern low-cost microscopes probably have, I don't know, they are equally good, if not better in some respects. But I would not want to trade it out or change it because I simply have a strong emotional connection to this microscope. Yeah. And then last but not least, of course, cost. You can get pretty much anything you want because there is no limit. If you're willing to pay for it, you can get pretty much anything. And just to give you a little comparison here, some people say, okay, a few €100, that's already quite expensive. I tell you, the light microscopes there can have, can cost like as much as 2 cars maybe, depending on what you have. And because they're individual objectives, specialized objectives where one objective alone can cost several €1,000s or dollars, just one objective. And now if you have 4 or 5 of these objectives, you have already, a very large sum of money that you have to spend. Again, these are objectives that sometimes researchers need or that are used in medicine and so on. But you see, sometimes if the area of application is so specific and if you need them, then they pay for it. Because the company that makes those very high-end microscopes, they don't compromise then. They say, okay, top quality and that's what you get and you got to pay for it. Because there is not so much... I mean, I wouldn't say there is no competition here, but the market is different. You don't cut corners, yeah? So, and if it costs 10 times as much, well, then that's how much it costs, yeah? So I just wanted to show you over here what quality can actually mean. And you probably have already listened a little bit. While listening, you've probably already guessed that there are some microscope brands that actually offer most of them. And to make it a little bit easier for you, I'm just going to say that, for example, the 4 companies, the traditional big 4 microscope companies, so I'm going to list them now, no specific order. They're Olympus, Zeiss, Nikon, and Leica. And those companies, those brands, they manufacture microscopes for research, for medicine. They have been around for quite a long time. And they also manufacture those high-quality special objectives, and they have highly modular microscopes. They have servicing companies that service the microscope. So if you have a problem with a microscope, there's a service person is going to come and is going to fix your microscope and maybe readjust the microscope. So you see, the target group is quite different, and you also pay for that. But this is not necessarily something that everyone needs, and therefore, for this reason, I do not automatically recommend microscopes from these companies, because you might end up spending way more money than actually necessary. As the saying goes, I mean, a microscope that costs 10 times as much does not allow you to see 10 times as much. So because there are also these other factors like resale value, and all these things play also a role. And then of course those brands, they allow you to have certain features and certain techniques that cannot be found in the lower cost microscopes that only cost a few €100 or a few $100. I want to simply talk a little bit, give you an example of one of the problems that we had here in our school when we replaced our microscopes. So several months ago, We had to exchange the microscopes because the old microscopes were already too old, but their optics of many of them were still okay. So what we need, instead of servicing them, which would have also cost a lot of money, we decided, okay, we're just going to replace them. And I myself actually called the school supplies company, and I asked them if they can supply us 16 microscopes without objectives, because we simply wanted to reuse the objectives that we still had from our old microscopes, because the objectives were, many of them at least, were still fine. And we wanted to save a little bit of money, and we asked, okay, can you just maybe order microscopes without objectives, because we want to reuse ours. And this was not possible. Okay, and that's why this is not possible. It says, yeah, because those microscopes essentially they come finished, packaged in a box from China. This is where they were manufactured. They're put together there, and that's what you get. And there is not even a possibility to buy individual parts. So you see, theoretically, the microscopes would have been modular enough to take out the objectives and put other ones in, but the company simply didn't offer this possibility. And this is essentially one of the differences, one of the big differences between very high-end companies that are producing microscopes for research and for medicine and so on, and for science, and those microscopes that are much more of a much lower cost, which are sold primarily for educational purposes, amateur use, and so on. And it is the lack of the possibility of upgrading the microscope to different things, and not only upgrading it, but simply also to exchange parts. So, for example, if I buy myself a microscope for 400, 500, 600 euros or dollars, I get a nice microscope. Yeah, I've made reviews of those microscopes, very nice, but you're kind of limited in actually changing the things, the optics, yeah, because the company might not offer the possibilities to upgrade that. So this is something that you have to take into consideration, and microscopes of those large traditional for manufacturers or brands, they are simply, it's not the question of the microscope alone, but it's the whole ecosystem, as you say, the support system, the modularity, the fact that you can essentially get individual parts. So if we had decided to buy microscopes from one of those four companies, the big companies, I could have gotten anything. I would have told them, please send me this or send me that, send me microscopes, 16 microscopes without objectives. They would have done that. So, and there is complete flexibility here. But all of this, of course, costs a significant amount of money. And the question is whether this is worth it. Okay? Because sometimes the cost is significantly higher than what you might expect. But then again, you have a second-hand market, so you can actually, the microscope resale value might be higher as well. So it's different a little bit, okay? So I'm just saying this to show you a little bit how difficult it is to judge quality, because the quality aspect is not only the optical or mechanical quality of the microscope, or worse yet, what some people think how much it can magnify, which is not even, in my view, not even relevant. But actually, there are so many other factors that play a role. So, and now I'm going to simply say, recommend a few, a brand and some microscope models. And I'm not saying that, I'm not affiliated with the company, but because I know the microscopes a little bit, because I obtained offers, just check them out on the website, contact the company, ask them for an offer. That's the only way that this actually works. You cannot buy those microscopes over Amazon. You have to directly contact the company. They will send you an offer, and then maybe this will already clarify a few things for you, because many of those microscopes might not even be considered because they're so expensive. Okay, here they are. I like Olympus because this was also my first microscope that I bought. And nowadays they have what they call educational microscopes. The CX 23, 33, and 43. The more advanced as you go up. Check them out online, compare them. And these are microscopes that essentially combine many of those features that I talked about, many of those characteristics that I talked about. They are more modular, they have a high optical mechanical quality, they are designed with ergonomics in mind, they have a good illumination system. To a certain extent, they might also be upgradable. You have to check now if, for example, if it allows you to upgrade it to phase contrast. But check them out, and you're going to be surprised how expensive they are. Some time ago, I actually obtained an offer, and the cheapest one that I could get, The cheapest one was over €1,000. Okay, for that price, you can already get two, lower cost microscopes that essentially have the same features from a technical perspective. But those cheaper microscopes, they might not be as modular. You can not maintain them as easily, maybe, and so on. So what I'm saying here is you can get anything as long as you're willing to pay for it. But I do not automatically advise you to pay so much money, especially at the beginning, especially if you yourself do not know yet what to look for. And what's going to happen in many cases is that people now start to go into analysis paralysis, as it's called. They start comparing microscopes now, the specifications and the advantages and disadvantages. And then they discover that from the specifications sheet, you don't get a lot of data about many of these aspects here. And it's difficult to compare. And then you post a question on a web forum and you will get conflicting answers where people are saying, oh, those modern Chinese microscopes, they're way better than they used to be. They're fine. And other people are going to say, heaven's sake, no, don't do that. Buy yourself a used microscope, which is a brand which has much higher value, because the opinions go apart so much. Yeah. So this is the problem. Different people have a lot of different expectations, and it's therefore very difficult to answer a question, what is the best microscope? What's the best car? It depends. I mean, why are there so many different cars around? Why is there not just, if there is one best car, then there should only be one type of car. If there is one best camera, then there must be only one type of camera. But you have got, I don't know, hundreds or 1,000 different camera models around. Yeah. If there's one best type of computer, why are there so many different computers around? There should be one best computer that everyone wants. And the reason why there are so many different models around this is because different people have different expectations, different wallet sizes, and whatever where you place an emphasis and a value on, that what is best for you. And because many people themselves don't know yet, I have the following recommendation. The recommendation is that do not invest too much money at the beginning, but maybe buy yourself a reasonably low-cost microscope at the beginning, and then when you outgrow that microscope, when you've reached the limits of that microscope, when you've exploited the possibilities of that microscope, then you buy yourself a new one. And then you are able to make a much better decision of what you actually want to buy, because the initial 500, 600 euros or dollars that you invested in this microscope is nothing compared to the price of a high-end microscope. Yeah, it's in my view. Yeah, because there is no limit. So I don't know if this has answered your question a little bit, but I just wanted to illustrate a little bit here that sometimes there is no easy way to actually around it, and for this reason I do not. I'm a little bit reluctant of recommending microscopes based on one single criterion. What is the best one? Well, on my website I actually have made reviews, and I am recommending microscopes because some people generally they need more guidance concerning this, and generally most people have been satisfied with my recommendations. Some of them, a handful of them, not. They're saying, well, why am I recommending those? You should go for high-end microscopes, that cost, several thousand euros. These are the good ones, right? And not a one for 500 euros or $500. You got at least for a proper microscope, you have to spend at least 3,000 to 4,000 euros or dollars. Then you have a proper microscope. Opinion of some people. So I'm just saying here that this is a very complicated issue. And it also depends a lot on, microscope. A large microscope is maybe good for a person who is sitting behind the microscope for many hours. Not a good thing for a child, because for children you need small portable microscopes. Best maybe even battery operated. But forget about this in research. You don't have small microscopes. Actually, maybe yes, if you need a field microscope that you want to take along into the field. Okay, in this case again, small portable microscope is again of an advantage. So you see? So what's the best one? I don't know. Okay, and that is the thing that I'm trying to say here. Difficult question, interesting question, but also a very complex question with many layers. What I'm going to say now is, don't overthink it. If you think about buying a microscope, make a decision and take it from there. After all, if you want to buy a microscope as a hobby, it is not the technology, it's not the hardware that should be in the focus, but the focus should be on observing nature, and kind of enjoying nature as well, and being a little bit intrigued by the microorganisms that you see, and being a little bit fascinated by the things that you can discover. Amateur microscopy, I know technology is interesting, the hardware, microscope, optics, it's all interesting, but there are so many other aspects as well. And let's also place a focus on nature observation. And there are lots of amateur microscopists out there that have very basic equipment, and they're doing serious amateur microscopy. I think that is also something that you should not forget. And last comment, in the past, many important scientific discoveries have been made with microscopes and microscope technologies that were far, far, far inferior to that what we have now. I mean, maybe some of the children's introductory microscopes that we have now were probably worlds better than some of the early microscopes that the researchers used. Okay, so let's just keep this in perspective as well. I think that's enough for today. Happy microbe hunting, and as always, and see you around next time. Bye-bye.